Welcome to the Building Efficiency Resources podcast, the BERcast. We are back to talk about the financial opportunities for our industry, meaning how do we finance the improvements that are go into homes for energy efficiency and have basically homes stand for themselves on their own 2 feet as financial products, irrespective of the political or economic climate that we currently are experiencing today in this country. Segment number 1, we're going to keep this really brief because we had a nice long conversation with our guests. I actually recorded segment 2 before segment 1. We're going to talk about something that I saw in the news that I thought was interesting here, which is the Tesla. Well, you may feel some kind of way about that nowadays, depending on who you are, but the sophisticated copper induction stove. Chris, why the heck are you talking about stoves as a piece of news? Well, the cool thing about this copper stove is that it runs on 120 volts. Unlike a standard electric stove and oven combination, which requires a 240 volt outlet, the copper technology only requires 120. And the value proposition here is that, look, a lot of homes are already wired for 120 for an electric stove. It's not that big of a deal. I think you could argue that standard electric stoves are maybe considered to be a little bit less exciting than gas stoves. People who are cooks, myself included, gas is great because you can turn it on, you can see exactly where your temperature is at. It's hard to know with the dial control on electric. With an induction range, basically, the burners on top of the stovetop heat up they excite the molecules of steel pans, and that's what ends up producing heat. It's not actually heat exchange through like a coil that's heated like a standard electric stove. And so because it's a different process of vibrating these molecules, this company, Copper, figured out, well, why don't we just make these 120 volts instead of 240? And then that way, people who are looking to exchange their gas stoves, which, although I think in a lot of ways, they're nice to use because you can see the temperature you're cooking with. The reality is a lot of people want to ditch gas. Why? Because it's potentially hazardous for our health. If you don't have good kitchen ventilation over your range, then cooking with gas especially produces a fair amount of indoor air quality contaminants that can be damaging to people's health long term. So people may want to kick their gas range for that reason, or just for the push to go all electric for the purpose of electrification, so that maybe in the future, maybe they can run their house off of solar panels, or their utility provider has a high degree of green energy in the grid. And so basically we're not producing a lot of pollution as a result of that cooking. So that's why someone may want to go all electric. But the challenge can be is you have to pay, if you don't already have a wire for 240 volts for this stove because you already have a gas unit, well, that means that you're going to have to pay an electrician. And sometimes it's tricky to be able to run a 240 volt line. You may already have your electric panel totally spoken for. You don't have any more room to add an additional 240 volt circuit on your electric panel. So now in order to just change your stove, you're thinking about, I have to run new wire and a new outlet, but also upgrade my electric panel or add a sub panel. So you're talking about a lot of price in order to do that. So the beauty, every stove, including gas stoves, have a degree of electricity because of electronic ignition burners and other controls. And so our standard 120 volt outlets, they're good to go. You can go ahead and buy this copper stove and go ahead and plug it in. I think it's kind of a little bit of a sexy looking stove too. So it's exciting. It's pricey, $6,000. But as we know, oftentimes these types of boutique products that come out on the market, over time maybe become more mainstream. So could I see a GE or a Whirlpool potentially kicking the tires on a technology like this and saying, maybe they're onto something? Maybe we should consider making our electric stoves 120 volts as well. That might be able to create more mainstream appeal irrespective of the cost. So again, I don't want to belabor the point for this segment because we got more to talk about in our guest segment right now. All right, segment number 2, our guest segment on the BERcast. This is obviously the heart of the show. And so I am very fortunate to be joined by 2 esteemed colleagues here in the building performance industry. I have my colleague on the ResNet Board of Directors, Sandra Adomatis with the Appraisal Institute, and then Matthew Cooper, who is the president of PEG. Thank you both for coming on the BERcast. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yes, my honor.
Okay, well, Matt, I guess, has taken in a couple episodes of the BERcast, so he has an idea about what we're all about. Sandra, not yet, but she's about to be indoctrinated into the world of the BERcast and what we're all about. Again, people, if you didn't know, after listening to us all this time, this podcast is a little bit different. It's cool to talk about building science and BTUs and insulated assemblies and how we prevent condensation and making houses more airtight and humidity and all that good stuff. There's a role for that, and we talk about that kind of stuff on the BERcast. But what we're really about is about the business of this industry. I'm in business, Matt's in business, Sandra's in business, and we're all a part of this building performance industry. And even if you don't run your own business, even if you work for a company, they're in business too. And even if you work for a nonprofit or even perhaps a government agency, we're all in this in terms of where things are heading so that we can promote the work that we do. And I think that it's safe to say that here in early March 2025, we've got maybe more questions than we have answers about where we're heading as a business in this building performance industry. And why is that? Well, we're not quite so sure about where things are heading with building codes. Are we going to keep charging forward towards net zero codes by 2030? That was supposed to be what we're doing, but I'm looking at my watch and we're only about 5 years away. And there's still a lot of states that are basically on the 2009 IECC, maybe not even enforcing that much. So the idea that we're going to get all the way to net zero here in 5 more years, I think we can do it. But do we have the will to do it is the question. We'll find out. Beyond the world of mandates, you must do, we have the world of incentives. Obviously, the 45L tax credit, huge opportunity for our industry, renewed as part of the Inflation Reduction Act back in the summer of 2022 for 10-year renewal. Woohoo! Finally, no more back and forth, and yes, it's renewed, and then it's not, and then it expires, and then it renews retroactively, and maybe, just maybe, a reduction in the gamesmanship of the 45L. We had some fancy proprietary softwares out there that seem to produce incredible results for home builders all across the board. Build with 2x4 walls? No problem. You got the tax credit. No insulation in your basement? No worries. You got the tax credit. That's no longer the case with the current 45L. You have to build the Energy Star or the Zero Energy Ready homes. We're not sure about where that's heading. Our guest a few episodes ago, Kurt Rich with NEMA, he was pretty pessimistic about the future of the 45L, at least in its current construction. And right now, I think we're just knocking on the door of what that's going to look like. We're about to go through budget reconciliation, as Kurt made reference to on that episode. And as part of that budget reconciliation, there's new administrative priorities at the executive level, the federal government. Those conflict perhaps with the outgoing administration or former administration's priorities. And in order to get what the new boss wants, we may have to get rid of some of the things that the old boss passed, and which mean there could be some change in some of the tax credits associated with the work we do. Where does that leave us? I mean, I think that a lot of people have a lot of anxiety, question marks. I mean, hey, I live here in Detroit, Michigan. If you don't think there's a lot of anxiety here nowadays about some of these changes with tariffs, well, come move to Detroit and you might start to feel it, because it's definitely feeling a little bit hot under the collar. Where are we heading as an economy? I don't know, but I've always believed and forgive me if I'm wrong, I've always believed that our highest calling wasn't necessarily just in the world of mandates. You must do, build it to code, and the code is going to get harder and more expensive. Or the world of incentives. Please do this. Please buy our energy rating and we'll give you $2,000 or $5,000. Please, if you just build a better home. I've always felt that our highest and best calling was to be viewed as more of a market-based financial tool. And I believe that that's really why the industry got started, was really based off of that premise. We were supposed to be a tool for energy efficient and energy improvement mortgages. That's why it's called the ResNet Mortgage Industry National Home Energy Rating Standards, is because it was supposed to be about leveraging energy efficiency in mortgages. We got away from that focus and more into the world of incentives and then mandates and third-party program labeling. And those are all good things. And I believe they will continue. I don't think that all the world of incentives and mandates are going away. I think we'll still have that. But I think this is an opportunity. And this is why I had Sandra and Matt come and join the cast here to talk about how do we bear our existence, our value proposition, irrespective of the political climate, irrespective of anybody's belief in climate change or pollution prevention. How do we bear out that we are ultimately valuable to the construction industry and the financial industry? Sandra, I'm going to go ahead and kick off with you. Maybe just give me a little bit of background about your experience. Obviously, you work for the Appraisal Institute, but what's maybe your experience getting involved in sort of this building performance industry as it relates to the work that you do?
Thanks, Chris. I'd love to answer that question. I've been on this path for 16 years of trying to influence the market that energy efficiency is worth the money. It provides a more comfortable home and a lower cost for maintenance of the home. It's been a real struggle to bring along the lending industry. I will say that now I'm beginning to see great strides there, because way back when they had guidelines that said energy efficient homes or energy efficiency should be considered in the appraisal. However, it was really glossed over by not only the appraisal profession, but also by the lending industry and even by the people that wrote the guidelines. But now they're beginning to see it is a driver that the market is looking for. If you do a survey of buyers, they're looking at energy efficiency as one of the top 5 things that they say they're looking at when they're looking at homes. The market is telling us this is something they want as an energy efficient home. And I think that ResNet has been really instrumental in helping me learn more about building science. Is something that we're not taught a lot about in our appraisal classes, but it's helped me to understand how to relate to the appraisers, why building science has changed enough to really make a difference in a home that was built in, say, 2000 compared to a home that was built in 2025. Huge differences there. It's also difficult sometimes to talk to a home buyer about it because they've never heard of energy ratings. And they ask the question that you've been talking about, Chris: how reliable are they? Where's the proof? And I think on the value side, I can show them proof that energy efficient homes do sell for more than non-energy efficient homes if they have a rating on them and if they're marketed. So that's the other side that I've seen over the years, is these homes are not marketed correctly by builders or by real estate agents. It's getting better than it was 16 years ago. But there's still room for improvement, just like there is in every part of the industry, the whole ecosystem of building science. And I think it's great that ResNet has partnered with the Appraisal Institute to help us with education, to get that curriculum into the appraisal world, and to help keep us updated on it, and to open that database. I had a call, I put a little clip on LinkedIn the other day about the access to the HERS ratings for appraisers. We only have 3,600 signed up. And when I did that announcement that it's free, sign up please. That's new. It's going to be a part of the new appraisal report format. I got over 8,000 impressions on that. So people were surprised that there's free access to this. And I even got a feedback from a lender from one of the GSEs that said, Sandy, you didn't get this quite right. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, if the appraiser can't find the HERS rating, then they don't have to consider it. And I said, it's free. It's open to the public. And he went, oh, they weren't even aware of this free access. So that's a big thing that we can do to promote that this is free, and it's even available to the property owner or the buyer that's looking for a home. Go on the resident database and find out if a home that you're looking at's been rated.
Yeah, absolutely. I think some of that organic building, the brand value, if I could say that there's been anything that we've done wrong or maybe a missed opportunity as an industry here over the last, 30 years or so that we've been in an industry, is that we got so obsessed with this world of incentives and mandates that maybe we forgot to promote more of the organic growth of consumer awareness. Ultimately, people who are involved in the lending and appraising industry, they're consumers as well. And if they're not aware of this industry, or that there are studies that show that, again, homes that are rated and have better scores sell for more and also are more secure financial products for lending institutions, well, no wonder we're not out there. Plus, we haven't, again, from the general public, I think there's a misconception that any new home is an energy efficient home just by nature. And to a certain degree, there's some truth to that. We've made some advances in sort of technology and standards of practice over the years, but there's no guarantee. As Matt very well knows, he runs one of the largest rating providers in the country. And there's a reason why we do all that testing and verification, isn't there, Matt?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because the builder, obviously, a lot of builders are trying to build more energy efficient homes, but just putting it on a set of plans and specs doesn't mean it's always going to happen. I'm sure that you're not out there in the field too much anymore these days. I'd imagine, Matt, probably not for a while, but I'm sure that your crew of inspectors all around the country see all types of different things that, had it not been for us as the energy rating industry, maybe some of those things might not have been caught or addressed. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And now we do, even though, as you said, I'm not out in the field that much anymore, we still get to see the outliers that get shared around our company when things get seen in the field that are not what we're expecting to find in the validation process. And often a lot of interesting things that maybe aren't even necessarily related to the rating process, but just good construction practices that you think are standards that are maintained universally. And the reality is, especially as, when you're looking at construction in multiple parts of this country, is that the trade base is still very broad and non-uniform. Yeah, it's incumbent upon us as a third party to be the eyes and ears of the programs that are relying on the accuracy of this information, as well as the builders who are relying. And most builders, particularly large builders these days, they're really project managers. They're not construction companies, and they have a limited number of people trying to control a lot of construction in a lot of places with a lot of moving parts. And they really rely on us to be an additional set of eyes and ears to make sure that those homes, whether they're code built or above code built, are being done the way that they're supposed to be done.
Yep, without a doubt. And so, Matt, I'm going to turn over to you just because your company and my company are two pretty different companies in a lot of ways in the rating industry. You're more of a sort of a direct services provider and an engineering focused company that works with single and multifamily developers all throughout the country, but maybe especially sort of in the eastern part of the country. And your versus BER, we're more of a third party provider. We have this diffuse network, I suppose you could say, of independent rating companies. Some of them are actually a decent size, but a lot of them are sort of 1 to 2 man operations. And again, going back to this conversation about what happens next, we're unclear about where codes are going. We're unclear about 45L. Again, I'm cautiously optimistic that we're not just going to flush it all down the drain. I'd say the other big thing that you and I were discussing just before we kicked off this episode was the opportunity with HUD and FHA basically mandating compliance with the 2021 IECC or equivalent. Do you perceive that is at all at risk, Matt? Are you concerned that that's potentially going to be rolled back? Or do you think there's a way to potentially strike a middle ground where we still have a mandate on a federal level to where the government's getting involved in financing homes, that it's expecting a certain minimum level of energy efficiency? Maybe it's not all the way to the 2021 or 2024, but maybe we're able to get somewhere close to that. How are you feeling these days about that?
Well, yeah, so since I'm based here in the DC area, I get a lot of road noise about a lot of things related to the change in administration and what's going on in a variety of elements of that industry. And we're definitely tuned into what's happening at HUD, what's happening at DOE, what's happening at EPA. It was about this time last year that myself and Ian from Meritage were asked by the GSEs to come speak at their joint GSE climate summit. And really the focus there was FHA's mandate that their entities, being HUD, USDA, and by proxy VA, were going to be required to have to meet the 2021 IECC. And that deadline is coming up in November of this year. That permits as of November 28th, I believe, of November, will have homes that are going to be available to an FHA-backed buyer will have to meet the 2021 IECC or a list of proxies that they allow, Energy Star being one of them. 2024 IECC also being one of them. So that's an interesting element to it. What I see with what will happen or what could happen with that mandate, it's interesting to me because the law that requires FHA to keep up with code was an existing law. It wasn't something that the Biden administration came up with. It was an existing bipartisan law that just hadn't been enforced since 2015 or so. It wasn't something created necessarily by the Biden administration. They just prompted that, hey, this needs to be caught up to date. And that was what precipitated that deadline being imposed, and then multifamily having its own deadline. So the likelihood of it being completely thrown out, I mean, we're all reading the tea leaves here. I personally doubt that it would be completely thrown out. I would not be surprised if the enforcement date got moved. But overall, I think the issue is really, how do you look at facts? And as an industry, our obligation is not just checking a box to verify that a home meets code or meets an above code program. It's incumbent upon us to help find the tools for builders to be able to satisfy those requirements. And if it's a base code requirement, that's one thing. If it's an above code program that a builder has elected to be involved in, then it becomes greater expense to them. Now, when we look at organizations who have lobbied that, hey, this HUD requirement is going to add $35,000 to every house, I think from a broad perspective, if you look at that statement, if you were building in a 2009 or even a non-code area of the country, and all you ever did was comply with code through the prescriptive path, then yeah, it may very well to go from 2009 on a prescriptive trajectory to 2021 IECC prescriptive compliance. Yeah, it might cost 35,000. But if you were to look at performance-based compliance, or you were to look at some of these other programs that FHA will allow as a proxy, such as Energy Star, such as now the 2024 IECC, which has a great deal more flexibility for builders, there's a lot of compliance, components that can be considered that can drastically reduce that cost exposure. So those are some of the things that I feel like it's incumbent upon us as an industry to be knowledgeable about and be able to speak clearly about to our builders and to their lenders, because it is very complicated. And as Sandra knows, and she's been a warrior on this field for a long time, really trying to change the industry on the appraisal side of things. And it's complicated to builders, even very sophisticated builders. And then if you look at builders who don't have a great deep field infrastructure. You're not talking about publicly traded builders. If you're looking at small builders, they don't have the people, they don't have the bandwidth, they don't have the staff to try to keep up with us. So it's incumbent upon us to be the eyes and ears for them, not just on the inspections and testing of homes, but on the larger playing field of how do we help pay for this. And as an industry, it's how do we help our builders pay for us? So if we want to try to get builders to do better than code, then we need to be part of that solution of helping them figure out a way to pay for it. And it goes beyond just, hey, if you build a tighter envelope, it should empower you to put in a smaller HVAC system. Those are some of the direct things that our industry touches, but the indirect things are things like we're talking about today, with incentives that are there from not just utility incentives and tax credits from 45L, but are there the potential out there for state tax credits for high efficiency home building? Are there incentives out there from the GSEs from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac? And those are the kind of things that we help to navigate for our builders, and help to try and navigate for the rating industry, to educate raters out there, providers out there, that there are things out there, there are tools in place, there are opportunities that exist, irrespective of 45L, irrespective of what might happen with EPA and Energy Star, that there are significant opportunities out there that we can make our builders aware of and help them participate in.
If I might jump in there, Chris, I'd like to add something here that Matt just touched on. That's going to be an issue that builders need to be aware of. If the 2021 IECC code requirement, when the appraiser comes around, they need to find comparable sales that also were built to that same standard. And it's very difficult to find that unless they go to the building permit. The saving grace might be the HERS rating. So with the 20 IECC code, if you've got a HERS rating, and I can look that up on the resident database, I can also look it up on my comparable sales. But the resident database doesn't tell me if it was built to 2021 or 2009. That big difference you talked about in the cost to build from a 2009 to 2021 code. That's the information we've got to get out to the appraisal world and to the agents, to say we might have two houses here built, but one's to a 2021 code and one's to 2009. That's the price difference. And what's the benefit to the homeowner? But I can see this in the beginning being a real challenge for the appraiser to really find true comparables that are all built to the 2021. When they proposed that, they came to me and asked me what I thought about the proposal using the 2021 IECC code. I strongly encourage them to not do the code, but to look at an energy rating, because it's more understandable, easier to understand for the public, and it's easier for the appraiser, the real estate agent, and we can find it. We have access to it, where we don't have that access easily to get to the 21 code on all of our sales.
Yeah, because Matt's saying if you just sort of look at 2009 IECC prescriptive versus 2021 IECC prescriptive, builders, their eyes pop out of their heads, because there's a lot that they're expected to do that prescriptively that they haven't been used to doing, really, in a lot of markets. In colder climates, an obligation to build with continuous insulation. That's not something that the average builder does. We wish for people who care about energy efficiency and comfort of buildings and building science, we think that there's a lot of value to continuous insulation, but it's been a hard sell for the average builder. Sort of the cost of implementation and changing sort of their standards of practice is not something that every builder has been ready to do. R60 in the attic. I mean, I think that the game was over with the 2021, just when people saw that R60. That was a bridge too far for a lot of people. But to Matt's point, for those who are really in this business, we're not selling prescriptive compliance to builders. Why? Because there are alternatives. There are performance-based alternatives, both Section R405, the simulated performance alternative, whatever they call it nowadays, is a cost-based compliance option that allows some trade-offs for builders. And then you have, of course, the ERI as an option, and not to say nothing, but also most versions of the code, including the 2021 and 2024, allow for building officials to accept above code programs as being equivalent to the code, such as an Energy Star Homes program. And to Matt's point, I think this is getting a lot more clear with the 2024. I just hope we didn't spoil the well, Matt. You know, and when I say we, I don't necessarily mean you. I don't mean anybody in this room necessarily, but the policy community, be careful what you wish for. I think everybody got really punch drunk on feeling like they had sort of a mandate to go and really juice the code. And again, I'm supportive of that because personally, I think it's time to move the needle forward. We had sort of 3 stagnant IECC cycles with the 2012 through the 2018 code where really there wasn't a lot of improvement. So you could argue that it was about time. Honestly, the 2021, as scary as it looks, it's only about an additional 10% incremental savings over that sort of 2012 to 2018 baseline. So it's not as big of a lift as people think it is necessarily. But there is a palpable communication and research arm of the national builders that have made, I think, a successful case, or at least have attempted to basically say it's a bridge too far to go to the 2021 ICC. I'm hoping we didn't spoil the well, kind of poison the well ahead for the 2024, because in a lot of ways, I want to flip the code. I want to put the performance options at the top and then put the prescriptive at the bottom, because I think that if we started looking at it that way, then people go, oh, okay, this is actually a lot more doable if we're just looking that way. I know that ResNet is pretty active in trying to come up with equivalent scores to things like the 2021 IECC, 2024, and even going backwards and saying, well, what would be an equivalent score to the 2009 or the 2012 IECC? I think that's challenging in its own right. I think it's worthy of a discussion. As a board member, it makes me a little bit uncomfortable because there are already published scores within the code. And so then we're saying, well, no, ignore those scores and we're going to go with a higher score. And that's the equivalent. Anyways, that's for a good debate on the board. The point being of all this, why am I spending time on this? Why are we talking about this? Well, because if you look at the trajectory of our industry in the last 3-4 years, there was a lot of enthusiasm. There's a lot to get excited about. 45L finally having some stability. And obviously it's not perfectly stable because like the gap going from version 3.1 of Energy Star to 3.2, that proved to be a bridge too far for some people. And now we got 3.3, and so maybe we'll be able to come back and make a good business case for that. But regardless, to have a stable tax credit that was a more, I think, rater delivered tax credit, not just like a CPA delivered tax credit, I think was a good thing. And then this opportunity with FHA mortgages are a substantial amount of the market. I mean, Sandra, do you have an idea of like what percentage of the market falls under FHA mortgages?
I don't know what the percentage is, but they have a really good program there. And think about the first-time home buyers, which is a large segment of the market these days. They're really stretched to be able to afford a home. So that's really a good financing mechanism for them. And they can go up to, I think it's 97% loan to value ratio, which is great because a lot of young couples don't have the kind of money to go with a conventional loan.
Well, and that's really important here because I think there's a lot of cynicism about the role of the government in housing and in all things nowadays. But we do have federally backed mortgage programs. We just do, and we have for a long time, and we're going to continue to, more than likely. And so let's do a little bit of strategy for people who don't really think about the financial end of this. Somebody wants to go and buy a new home, and what's the average new home up to? It's something like, I don't know, $300,000, $400,000 nowadays. I mean, it's expensive. When you're a young person, you're a Gen Z person, you're an average person. You maybe have some student loan debt. You're trying to build a family. You're trying to build some wealth, and you want to own a home, which is completely understandable. Let's just say that for the sake of argument, the average home costs $350,000. Generally speaking, for a non-FHA mortgage, you would have to be bringing at least 10% cash to the table. So that's $35,000. That's not a joke for a lot of people. That's a lot of money to be taking from your savings if you're a younger person who maybe hasn't had a lot of like family wealth and you're having to do it on your own. To save $35,000, that's not an easy task, especially when rent and the cost of living in general has just gone up so much. So an FHA mortgage, to Sandra's point, allows someone to be able to basically finance 97%, up to 97%. That means they don't have to come with 3% down, which obviously now we're talking about $10,000 instead of $35,000. That sounds like a great deal, but that's why energy efficient homes are so much more important, people, because if we, the people, we're the government, we pay the taxes. This is supposed to be our government. If we're saying we're going to go ahead and invest in you, Mr. and Mrs. who are buying this house for the first time, and you're 28 years old and you want to buy a house to start a family and you only have $10,000, well, number one, we want people to own homes. Isn't that part of building stability in communities and building generational wealth and stimulating the economy and allowing for a nice nest for a family to be raised? All the good American values that we supposedly stand for, we want to support this, right? So we want people to take that $10,000 and go buy that home so that the builder makes some money, the rater makes some money, all the rest of that, the appraiser makes money, all the way down the line. It's called the economy, people. So we want that to happen, and we recognize that not everybody's going to have 10% down. So that's why we have federally backed mortgages. But then the idea that we would say, you know what, we're going to back this, but we don't care about energy efficiency. That doesn't matter. We don't care whether or not there's a good blower door number or if the ducts are disconnected in the attic. We just need to throw those suckers up and go and sell them. That's the stupidest mindset. I'm sorry, but anybody who has that mindset, you're missing the big picture, people. Like, this is why this was put forward into legislation, because when people have a home built to the 2021 IUCC performance or prescriptive or 2024 or Energy Star, their bills are going to be a lot more predictable. They're going to have stability in knowing what their energy costs are. That's why this was included. And that's why we have to move the needle forward, because before, to Matt's point, in 2015, we did a catch up to the 2009. And with all due respect to the 2009, it was a fine code for the era, but it's old. I mean, come on, people, get with the program. I mean, we're talking about a code that's almost 25 years old now. Well, not quite that long, but sorry, 15 years old. It's still a long time. We've come a long way, and costs have gone up substantially since 2009. That's the idea behind all this. I think it's easy to throw mud and say it's an agenda and so on and so forth. But I think that we have to use our higher minds here. I mean, Sandra, am I wrong to say that there's been several studies that have come out to show that more energy efficient homes are more stable financial products?
Yes, there's a couple studies out there that show they have a lower default rate if they have energy rating on them and they're built to an energy standard. The other thing to keep in mind was with this FHA energy efficient mortgage, you can roll the cost of a HERS rating right into the mortgage. So they allow you to do that. So why not get that rating just to have that comfort that to know it's going to perform based on the rating that you receive. And you talked about my grandson, just 26 years old, bought his first home, and he and his wife were looking, and they didn't want to buy an older home because they knew the troubles their mother had with an older home and not having money to make the repairs or make the upgrades they needed. So his home was $365,000. He built a new one. He wasn't able to put a lot of the energy upgrades he wanted in it, but he did do some of them that he could afford. But that's something else that we need to promote more of, is buying these newer homes. You've got pretty much, if you get an energy efficient home, you got a lower cost to build or lower cost to maintain it. But also you've got that security, hopefully 15 years or more, you're not going to have any major repairs to a new construction if it's built to a current code. So that's another security blanket.
I'd say, Chris, when we talk about housing affordability, there's different ways to look at housing affordability. The mindset of just lowering the cost of construction as the only metric of evaluating or controlling housing affordability is not the only metric. And so to your point and to the point of this discussion is if we look at total cost of ownership and this is really what has driven Fannie and Freddie to have their green mortgage-backed securities programs is, FHFA, these GSEs, their mandate is housing affordability. That's what drives everything that they're looking at. When we talk about total cost of ownership, to Sandra's point, first there's qualifying to buy the house. That's step one. But then it's really, what is it going to cost you to own this house and run this house? And when we look at the cost of ownership, outside of the mortgage itself, the next most expensive thing is to heat and cool the home. When we look at what are these programs driving at, it's not necessarily an environmental mandate. It's the cost of operating this home and reducing how much energy it takes to heat and cool it. When you have somebody like Fannie and Freddie that look at this, they say, let's take the Fannie Mae program, for example. If the barrier to entry for their program is Energy Star. They did their analysis. Freddie did their own analysis. They looked at what programs are out there. Fannie landed on, we feel like Energy Star is the most viable, defensible, well understood, well vetted, well known program out there. So that's what they utilized as their barrier to entry for their program. So when we talk about how do we find money to offset these improvements in the home so that we encourage builders to build an above code program compliant home, whether it's a higher code like 2021 IECC or it's an Energy Star, a new construction home certified, we're really trying to drive to encourage this construction methodology that costs the end user, the home buyer, the homeowner, costs them less to operate. And that then therefore helps them qualify, or should help them qualify, for more home or for a more accessible down payment, as you've already talked about. When we look at from the rating community, and we're looking at trying to find a way to really share this opportunity with builders, is we want to look at, first of all, the most cost-effective compliance path. We've touched on this already, talking about the performance compliance paths that are available in code and in above code programs. Then we look at how does that impact the cost of construction. So we want to analyze and help the builder find the most cost-effective compliance for them. And every builder may be a little bit different. We have some very large builders that obviously have much more purchasing power. So they may have access to better tools for them as far as the cost of ERVs or cost of HVAC systems or cost of windows or cost of insulation. But then we need to help them offset by applying, as I said earlier, if you have a much more efficient home, then we can put in a smaller HVAC system, maybe a quarter ton, maybe a half a ton, which are real dollars. But now we need to look at what incentives are out there. Are there utility incentives that are compliance based with either code or with an above code program like Energy Star? And then, as we've talked about, 45L, federal tax credit, that's another layer of opportunity to help defray the cost of building this home that will be less expensive to operate. But now Fannie and Freddie, they came out with these tools with these green mortgage-backed securities programs that are the relationship between the lender and the GSEs, Fannie and Freddie. When we help to educate builders that through the relationship they have with either a captive lender, if they're a very large builder, which most of the large publicly traded builders have captive lending arms, so they have direct control over the lending process. But even regional builders, typically they most frequently have a relationship with certain lenders, and those lenders are often part of a large network of lenders. When you look at somebody like Guaranteed Rate or Loan Depot, where they're a separate entity from the builder, but they often have joint ventures with builders, but they have the ability to connect with Fannie and Freddie and sell these loans that are based on, with Freddie, it's a HERS index number. With Fannie Mae, it's Energy Star certified. They can sell these mortgages to Fannie and Freddie and get money back for selling this above code built home, because Fannie and Freddie have a market on the selling side where they can bundle these mortgages and sell them to investors that are interested in investing in high efficiency homes. So when we look at the dollars out there, You're talking about local incentives can be $1,000 or more depending on a utility company. We could save builders $1,000 or more in right sizing equipment in their homes and finding them the most cost effective compliance path. 45L can provide $2,500 or $5,000 depending on Energy Star or Zero Energy Ready. But now, if you also add on to that, Fannie and Freddie can pay on average $800 or so, depending on the average size mortgage. That's another tool in our tool chest of helping the builder offset the cost of building that home that's going to be less expensive for the homeowner to live in. And that's really what we're trying to help educate and bundle together these opportunities that then defray as much of, or in a lot of cases, more than the cost of complying with that higher code or that above code program. And it's complicated, and that's where it's incumbent upon us as an industry to be informed about it, educated on it, and be able to speak clearly about it and engage with the builder, help them engage with the lender, connect those lenders to the tool process that Fannie and Freddie have for buying these loans. And the net result is we get better performing homes, and we help the builder offset the cost so that the affordability question is really the operating of the home for the next 30 years of home ownership or more for the buyer that's going to buy that above code home.
I'm going to jump in here and give another tip that builders need to be aware of, and not only educate the builders about the lending process or what's available out there, but buyers, where their buyers need to understand that you've got to ask for an energy efficient mortgage. Some of the small builders don't have the connections to the larger lending institutions. And I did a survey on LinkedIn one time and put out there, how many people are doing energy efficient mortgages? The response is, I did not get one positive response back. What I kept getting back was nobody ever asked for it. Well, they're supposed, a loan officer or a mortgage broker is supposed to be the professional who looks at the client and looks at what they're trying to mortgage and put them in the best program. And for an energy efficient home, the best program is going to be one of these energy efficient loans. And then number two, the thing I want to emphasize to the lender or to the builder and to the buyer is they need to ask that lender or loan officer when they make the mortgage application, do you have an appraiser list of appraisers who have taken energy efficient education to even understand what they're looking at? And that's a really important thing, or you may end up having to go through a process called reconsideration of value if you end up getting an appraisal that doesn't understand the energy efficiency, doesn't use comparables that are true comparables to the energy efficient program, and the value is much lower than the sales price. And then you have to go through what they call a reconsideration of value, which extends time and puts pressure on the buyer to come up with support for why they believe it should be a higher value. So those are two big tips, I'd say. Be sure you educate your buyer to use the right lender, and then make sure the lender that you're choosing has a database of appraisers that have had education.
I think we've covered the full sort of gamut of the big picture here about even if some of these mandates or incentives start to wind back, that maybe let's go back to fundamentals and let's take advantage of some of these financial opportunities. So maybe let's just go one at a time here. So I'm on the HUD website for energy efficient mortgages. They're not the only one. Freddie, the VA, and Fannie all offer an option there as well. As Matt alluded to, and Sandra, energy efficient mortgages, again, this was the reason why we were even created as an industry in a lot of ways. 1992 was the first time we had a pilot done. And then in 1995, it was expanded into a national program. What else happened in 1995? Oh, that's right. ResNet was formed. So again, when we think about what were we really supposed to be set out to do, what is our calling as an industry, validating that a home is going to be more affordable after energy efficient improvements, factoring in that these improvements don't cost something. To Matt's point, even if we use a performance methodology, going from the 2009 IECC to the 2021, it's going to cost something. But are those additional incremental costs incurred by the builder going to be that may have to be passed on directly to the consumer? are they going to basically result in there being a net positive cash flow for the owner of the home? And so that was the whole idea behind energy efficient mortgages going way back to 1995. And to Sandra's point, we've had this issue where you have to be in the know in a lot of ways in order to, be included as a sort of a qualifying agent for these energy efficient mortgages. Sandra, do you feel like maybe we're on the sort of the precipice of that changing, where this is not so much nobody does that because nobody asked for it and nobody knows how to do it, to the point where this might become a more mainstream attribute of our industry? What do you think?
Oh yeah, I can see it in the market already. Buyers becoming more informed about it. And the green bond securities has helped to promote that too, because that put Fannie and Freddie on notice, hey, we can sell these for a little more on the secondary market. So we should be promoting this. They should have been promoting it way back in 1992, 95. But it took a while for us to mature, the market to mature. So I think we're really on the cusp of seeing great strides moving forward.
So all right, so there's energy efficient mortgages, which again, just to be clear, FHA already have a program. Freddie Mac has a program. This is a playthrough video, but they have a program. Fannie has a program as well. The VA has a program. So we have pretty much all. I mean, I think amongst FHA and VA and Fannie and Freddie, that pretty much covers almost the entirety of the market, except I guess if we're dealing with cash sales. I think we're good to go in terms of there being energy efficient mortgage coverage. Matt, I'm maybe going to ask you to maybe speak a little bit about this opportunity with green bonds. You've already alluded to it, and you already, I think, explained the value proposition. But again, for listeners that don't have a lot of experience thinking about mortgage-backed securities as a sort of a financial tool, what's the point of all this? And then how can a builder use this?
So the point to Fannie and Freddie is specifically connected to their mission. For Fannie Mae, and I can speak more directly on Fannie Mae because we've worked with them with their program since it started 4 years ago. They're, as I said, they're driven by affordability. So they're really looking at what can we do in the marketplace to bundle these mortgages together that all represent homes that meet our mission statement of homes being more affordable. And again, that's back to the cost of ownership. So it's really looking at what validates that these homes and the associated mortgages represent higher performing homes that cost less for people to live in. So they created this process where they can purchase these mortgages from the lenders that are working with these builders. So again, if you're working with a publicly traded builder that has a captive lending arm, it's very simple. They simply set up the relationship between the lender who's getting the incentive from Fannie and Freddie, and how do they credit that back, those dollars back to the builder. It's a little more complicated for builders that don't have a captive lending arm, but not that difficult to do. Essentially, the loan gets sold to Fannie and Freddie. The amount of money, the amount of incentive that they're paying fluctuates with what the base rates are for the country at that time. So they're paying a couple of ticks over the prime rate, depending on where they are in their cycle of bundling those. Typically, they're selling these bundles of mortgage-backed securities monthly. So that's really the process is simply educating the lender that's working with the builder on how to connect with the windows, is what they're called, with selling these mortgages to Fannie and Freddie. And what's interesting with Fannie in particular is they're always looking at what else can we do? What else can we add to this? The most recent thing is they've now added HERS H2O or WaterSense as an additional incentive opportunity. So builders can now qualify through their lender to get this incentive for building WaterSense homes or HERS H2O homes, whether or not they're doing Energy Star for Fannie. If they're doing Energy Star and they're doing WaterSense, they can add those cumulatively together. If they're doing one or the other, they can qualify for that incentive separately. Fannie is always looking at what's the next thing for us. They're paying attention to our industry. For the past 2 years, the past two cycles, they've attended the ResNet conference. Freddie has attended the conference. They're aware of the relationship between the HERS industry and ResNet and what they're trying to drive as what they see as change in the industry by making home ownership more affordable through these programs. So Fannie's looking at solar right now. They're looking at the existing homes market. These are all the things that are related to the relationship between FHFA and FHA on the mandate versus the incentive that is not mandated but is voluntary. As you said, regardless of the whims and the slings and arrows of the industry and how it gets changed by political will, these are programs that are independent of that. It's incumbent upon us to be educated on them and ensure that our builders are aware of this opportunity and maximize their participation in it. I mean, we've got builders right now that have been in the Fannie Mae program for 4 years, and they're realizing millions of dollars a year in pay-ups for these energy efficient mortgages. And that's real dollars that help pay for the cost, as you said, of complying with an above code program or a higher code program. So it's not insignificant. I mean, our own company, we have a separate rebate department. And on a typical year, between incentives from manufacturers, incentives from utility companies, incentives through tax credits, incentives through the GSE Green Mortgage-Backed Securities programs, we're managing and controlling the awareness for our builders of in excess of $30 million a year. So it's real dollars. It really helps the builders build these above code program compliant homes that create real affordability options for buyers.
Yeah, this is really exciting stuff because honestly, I sit on the ResNet board of directors, so I've heard about these green bond programs, but frankly speaking, I didn't really understand sort of the implications. I didn't realize that builders could literally get paid a few $100 a home for basically having the loans sold into these bonds. Obviously, there's a lot of talk right now about investments in this country, and stock market days been going up and down and up and down and up and down. We'll see what happens with more equities investing. So when times are a little bit maybe rough when it comes to equities investing, a lot of people turn to bonds. And traditionally, I think people think of bonds as being something that would happen at a government level. You could invest in treasury bonds. And so you're literally investing in sort of the stability of the US dollar and the US economy over time. Or you could take out a municipal bond and invest in that, such as here in Detroit. We're back trying to make money for ourselves through bond capture and people investing in our municipal government, kind of getting better over time. But yeah, hey, there's this other forms of bond investing, such as a green bond, basically. And it's another form of infrastructure investing, because what it essentially is it's investing in our privately owned housing and multifamily building stock as being higher performing, more stable forms of investments for the country and for these financial institutions. Am I wrong about that, Matt, or is that kind of sort of the essence here?
No, you got it. You hit it right on the head. I mean, there are massive international and domestic financial tools that they're out there looking for these bonds to invest in, along with everything else. You have companies like BlackRock, others there's unions out there, teachers unions, et cetera, that they're the ones that are investing in these types of bonds on behalf of their members, and BlackRock's investing on behalf of they're buying on behalf of their investors. These are all part of a multi-pronged approach to investment on behalf of a variety of interests, and there's significant components to the financial opportunities that are out there. You're right on.
Well, this is pretty exciting stuff, because what I really see this is as a catalyzing opportunity in a moment of, I'd say, apparent challenges. How can we find the bigger opportunity as the building performance industry? And there clearly is a financial opportunity here perceived by organizations that control portfolios of literally probably billions or trillions of dollars worth of assets here, focused on the work we do to participate in this green bond program. You have to be sort of Energy Star or equivalent sort of as a minimum participation level. If you go over to the Freddie program, you have to have a HERS index of, I believe, 55, if I recall correctly, as sort of a minimum benchmark. Yep, here we go. HERS index of 55 or Energy Star in order to get in on the action. And so I think that this presents a big opportunity. Now, there is talk about potentially Freddie and Fannie no longer being under federal receivership and going back to being more private, market sort of entities. I don't know, Matt, do you have any thoughts on whether or not you think that changes their philosophy when it comes to programs like this? Or do you think that sort of the dividends are too good to pass up?
Yeah, no, it definitely does not change their calculus on these programs. These are an independent financial objective of theirs to reflect their mission statement, their mission priorities, and to encourage that type of construction, as well as to create this financial tool that helps them as a business.
Well, and then I guess the last point I just want to hit on here is one that I think is, well, I guess going back here, it's the green bond program should be mentioned. It's not just for single family. Matt, your company works a lot with multifamily, so here's a little sort of write up here on the 2020 green bond impact through Fannie. And so we have a passive house building. Our friends at the Passive House Institute US certified a building in Seattle, a 32 unit multifamily program that went through their multifamily green bond program. Matt, do you maybe, for our listeners who are more focused on the multifamily sector, do you maybe want to speak to how that program works?
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar. There are both loan opportunities through the above code certification process as well as on the bond side. The calculus is a little bit different when doing multifamily. The investment is a little bit different than the single family products as far as doing Energy Star or zero energy ready multifamily. Interestingly enough, the multifamily industry in a lot of ways ahead of the single family industry with their awareness of these above code programs and how they potentially impact finance. When you look at in that example that you had there, JLL, Jones Lang LaSalle, they're a huge player in the space of above code built properties. Hines is another one that they're very keenly tuned into the opportunity that presents itself with 45L related tax credits and these fiscal tools from organizations like Fannie, Freddie. So they're a little bit easier in some cases to work with because they're already aware, and they're often driving the conversation with the rating industry about they come to the rater saying, no, this is what we're doing, we know how to do it. So in a lot of cases it's less of a push for the rater to try to educate them, but it's definitely a well-used tool within the multifamily industry.
I mean, we've covered a few, I think the topic broadly, and then we've talked about a few specific things. Back to the future, we're gonna get back to focusing on energy efficient mortgages, and BER and Sandra, we're going to be working together a little bit just to increase our raters' sort of baseline knowledge of this over time. So look for more information on that soon. These green bond opportunities, to me, this sounds just another tool in the toolkit to convince builders that investing in the efficiency of their home makes sense. To Matt's point, we can stack all of these different financial tools. So it's no longer, oh, well, all I have is a utility rebate. No, now you've got a utility rebate plus potentially the 45L, plus potentially the ability to qualify a buyer through an energy efficient mortgage program that helps to qualify them for perhaps a larger loan amount, but on a more sort of financially secure product through having an energy efficient mortgage. And then the builder can maybe even get a little bit of a kickback from these green bond programs. And if you think about it, some builders out there, it's not a little kickback. If you think about the DR Hortons of the world building almost 100,000 homes per year, if we go with Matt's figure of about $800 for a participating home, imagine if they built Energy Star across their entire portfolio. Now they do a lot of FHA that may not necessarily qualify under this or whatnot, but still they have a lot of market-based sales that would fall under this. That's big money, folks, for a large corporate builder like this. That you're talking about big things, but even if you're talking about your local home builder, man, somebody who's building 10 homes a year, well, it's better than a sharp stick in the eye, as a smart guy might say. It's getting some money kicked back in order to do the right thing. But it all comes down to, I think, bearing all this out in the appraisal process. And so, Sandra, I'm just going to kind of have the last topic left for you. You've sort of indicated that there's been strides made in this, but it's still, people have to really know how to ask the right question for green appraisals, energy efficient appraisals. Where do we stand currently in the world of energy efficient appraisals?
Yeah, well, it has gotten better. Like I say, I've been on this warpath for 16 years, and we still only see, we've got about 78,000 licensed appraisers in the United States, and I would say less than 3% of them have taken any classes on energy efficiency. Some of them have taken maybe a basic class or have read about it, but I will say overall, I'm seeing appraisals that are taking it more into consideration. Now we're seeing this panic with appraisers because there's a new form coming out, appraisal report format from Fannie and Freddie, and it has in it a lot of these fields that you see on the green addendum. So it's something they're going to have to learn. So I'm beginning to get more people asking me to do a webinar for them or come do a class. I've done a couple classes this year. I've got a couple more scheduled. I am beginning to see more interest in, I guess I better learn more about this energy efficiency green feature thing so that when I'm required to write this new form, which is November 2026, that I have the knowledge I need and the resources. And again, that's where I've really been pushing appraisers to sign up for the ResNet portal so that they have access to all the information they need, free at no charge to them. So it's a real plus. And then there's also the Green Building Registry from Earth Advantage that also you can even download some of the green addendums on properties from the Green Building Registry. So it's another free tool. And I always like to encourage realtors and builders to make those lists available to appraisers that may come to your site and they don't understand what you're talking about. Give them some of these resources. Tell them that they can find information on their comparables and these free resources or databases. It is increasing, it's getting better, and I think once the new format comes out, you'll see a real increase in the knowledge on the appraiser side. But again, I would say it's not only the appraiser we need to educate, it's the real estate agent and it's also the public. So I think we need to do a lot more work on the public side for them to understand, how do I determine a house that's energy efficient? Well, hers is one way. They're not going to understand a 2021 IECC or 2024, but they can understand something simple like a HERS rating.
Yeah, because it's interesting. There's, to a certain extent, you get into the world of buying and selling homes, and you can have, to a degree, sort of conflicting interests or cross purposes. The point of this for a builder or someone who is selling an existing home and maybe they've made some improvements, take my own home. It's not a new construction home, but it was built in 1920 here in Detroit. When I bought it, didn't have a stitch of insulation in it. The mechanicals were really crusty and beat down. Well, I've made a lot of improvements. My home is substantially more airtight, better insulated, better mechanical systems. I'm about to put in new windows. My HERS score probably went from 180 down to, well, it's still an older home, but I'm definitely under 100 now, which is great. So as it stands, though, if my home went on the market at the same time as my neighbor's home next door, and let's just say that the interior finish quality is relatively the same size and square footage and bedrooms and baths and all like that, our two homes might appraise for the same amount of money, despite the fact that his home maybe has no energy efficient features in it, whereas mine has been invested in. The reason why this matters, again, is that I would like to sell my home as the seller for a premium because I made these investments. I would like to be able to sell it for more than my neighbor's home. And the person who purchases my home may actually have round trip net cost to them that's lower because my utility bills are pretty reasonable nowadays because I have made these improvements, whereas my neighbor's home maybe their bills are higher and therefore less predictable. So we would like for me to have my home appraised for more. Again, there's cross purposes. Realtors, sometimes the seller's realtor probably wants it to appraise for more. The buyer's realtor, maybe not. It sort of depends on the market. For the buyer, maybe not. It sort of depends on sort of the market. If you're in a place like Detroit, you actually want it to appraise for more so you can get a mortgage to justify the cost. But if in most sort of more mature, stable markets, that's not necessarily the case. So usually a home buyer might want it to be appraised for a little bit less so they can get a deal. So there's a little bit of a degree of cross purposes here, but the whole thing, folks, is that the more that this becomes mainstream, the more that it becomes just a fixed feature of the world of doing business, all of a sudden it opens up our marketplace potentially to every home in America. Imagine that in order to create an additional sales comp, basically an appraisal boost, I had the incentive to get my home rated and put in the ResNet registry so that my home scores, let's just call it a 75, and that looks pretty good compared to the average resale in Detroit that is maybe really bad. So I don't know, Sandra, do you feel like there's an opportunity to potentially not only get in on sort of more mainstream of the new construction market, but also in sort of the resale market as well?
Oh yes, I'm glad you touched on that because that's a huge opportunity for the raters, and I think it's going to be a growing trend here is to fix up these older homes. And this green addendum is one way to communicate the updates. I tell homeowners when you make updates, take the green addendum and keep track of it. Sometimes we'll go into a home and we'll say, "Have you made any major improvements?" They'll say, "Oh, I put new carpet in the bedrooms and I painted." And then I'll open up the HVAC closet and I'll see it's a high efficiency unit that's been put in. I'll get into the attic and see, well, you've blown some more insulation in. They forget about those things. So if you identify them on the green addendum as you do them and keep it in a safe place, then when you get ready to sell it, attach that to the MLS so that the new buyer can look at it and say, hey, I should pay a little more for this house because of course, this house has been updated. The one next door that's for sale is just like it, but I don't see those updates. And it's even better, like you say, if you have a HERS rating on it, and then that gets advertised in the multiple list. Keep in mind that in 2019, Freddie Mac did a study of HERS rated homes compared to similar homes that were not HERS rated. And they found 2.7% increase in sale price for a HERS rated home, no matter what the rating was, compared to a similar home that was not rated. And then they looked at HERS ratings that were lower, meaning they were much more energy efficient. They sold between 2 and 5%, 2.7 and 5% more than homes that had higher ratings. So keep that in mind. And then on my website, Adomatis Appraisal Service, under resources, I have a list of studies that have been done, and most of the studies that have been done by appraisers or by the academic world are showing energy efficient homes are selling for 2 to 5% on average for energy efficient homes. There's a whole list there. It's usually 2 to 5% is where the main sweet spot is. If you have geothermal or solar photovoltaic systems, it may exceed the 5%. So that's a good starting place. We know they can sell for more, but again, what we found on most of these studies is if it was not advertised when it was listed for sale, it did not sell for more. So it's really incumbent upon the builder and the realtor to make sure those features are clearly advertised in the listing.
Well, Sandra, you and I've got some work to do on the ResNet board because I think there's an opportunity here for continuing to sharpen our value proposition as an industry. Again, I want to credit everything that's been accomplished. Our former guest, executive director of ResNet, Steve Baden, who's been on the BERcast now a couple times. He announced his retirement this year. Steve, he took us from a fledgling organization that maybe had a great mandate for energy efficient mortgages, but didn't quite get off the ground. But he really helped to transition some challenging times in our industry. And really, we've grown leaps and bounds in terms of participation. But the real opportunity is to get people to start labeling these homes and creating consumer demand and awareness. What happens if every single time someone went to go and buy a home, just like they want to know baths and kitchens and square footage and school district, what happens if they also wanted to know something about the HERS index score, or if it was an energy efficient certified above code program? I think that that's really where we need to be heading, is to mainstream this. Builders still, I'm amazed. We get all these homes rated and very few of them are actually labeled and advertised as such. I think we need to really lean into the market awareness, the organic market awareness, because that paired with these financial opportunities, again, that is our opportunity, irrespective of the economy, irrespective of the political climate. That's my opinion. Matt, am I crazy to feel that way?
No, I agree 100%. It's that awareness outside of the new homes industry is very important. The overall opportunity for the rating industry to really touch, the dearth of home sales in America, and the issues behind awareness of the differences between homes built in different decades, et cetera. There's a tremendous opportunity for the rating industry to make a significant difference outside of just new homes. And I think that's an imperative for us to look at. Like I mentioned earlier, Fannie's looking at the same thing from the refinance side of things, the home equity line of thing. There's a lot of opportunity out there to take into consideration improvements that can be made to the existing housing stock. And the new homes industry is going to be behind the curve for a very long time on keeping up with the demand for new homes. So the resale, the reuse of existing homes in America is still going to be the driver for the foreseeable future. So playing a role in that and improving the performance of those homes is a huge thing. And as you said, outside of political climate of discussion of electrification, et cetera, from a purely financial perspective of cost of ownership, the opportunities are in a lot of ways better in the existing homes arena than they are in the new homes arena. So definitely an area that we should and need to see the industry expand.
Good deal. Well, Matt, Sandra, really appreciate y'all coming on the BERcast. This was a fascinating conversation. And again, a call to action and a call to feel good about the work that we do. I know sure, a lot of us have been a little bit anxious about what the future holds here over the next few years. But come on, folks, realize we have a huge opportunity right in front of us if we just go out there and seize it. The opportunity to leverage the work we do across the board, new homes, multifamily properties, existing homes. There's really a tremendous amount of opportunity just based off of the numbers alone. And that's really what we should be excited about. So thank you both once again so much for your leadership and stewardship of our industry and spending your time here on the BERcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for having us.